The smartest response to a toxic person isn't a comeback. It isn't a perfect argument. It isn't even proving them wrong. In fact, the moment you start arguing with a toxic person, you've already lost. Because arguing was never the game they were playing. Here are 7 things emotionally intelligent people do instead, and why silence, distance, and boundaries beat any argument every single time. Here's what most people get wrong. They think dealing with a toxic person means winning the conversation, proving your point, getting them to finally admit they're wrong. But toxic behavior isn't looking for truth. It's looking for a reaction. Every argument you win on logic, they win on chaos. The moment you engage on their terms, you're not debating a person anymore, and you're feeding a pattern that was never designed to end in resolution. Smart people figured this out a long time ago. They stopped trying to win the argument and started changing the game entirely. Way number 1, they stop explaining themselves. Toxic people love asking why, not because they actually want an answer, but because every explanation gives them something new to pick apart, twist, or argue against. Why can't you come? Why do you feel that way? Why would you even say that? Each answer becomes a new thread to pull. Each justification becomes new material. The more you explain, the more surface area you give them to work with. Smart people learn to answer with less, not more. That doesn't work for me as a complete sentence. It doesn't need a paragraph behind it. I've made my decision doesn't require a defense. The less you explain, the less there is to manipulate. Because you've stopped handing over the raw material they need to keep the conversation going in circles. Way number 2, they use the gray rock method. Psychologists call this the gray rock method, becoming as unresponsive and uninteresting as a rock. It sounds almost too simple to work, but it's one of the most effective tools against manipulation. Toxic people are drawn to reaction. Anger, tears, defensiveness, panic, all of it is fuel. A big emotional response tells them their tactic worked. So instead of engaging emotionally, smart people respond with flat, brief, boring answers. Okay, sure. Noted. Nothing to grab onto. Nothing to escalate. This isn't about being cold or dismissive. It's about refusing to be the show. Without a reaction to feed on, most manipulative dynamics lose their oxygen fast because the entire mechanism depends on your engagement to keep running. Way number 3, they set boundaries without justifying them. A boundary that comes with a 10-minute explanation behind it is really just an invitation to negotiate. A boundary stated plainly is not. I'm not discussing this anymore doesn't need a follow-up. I won't be attending doesn't need a reason attached. The moment you add justification, you've reopened the door you just tried to close. Toxic people will often push exactly at the point where you start explaining yourself. Because to them, justification signals the boundary is still soft, still negotiable. Smart people learn to close the door calmly once and leave it closed. No relitigating. No follow-up essay defending why the boundary exists in the first place. Way number 4. They create distance between the trigger and the response. Toxic interactions are engineered to provoke an immediate reaction, a sharp comment, a sudden accusation, a guilt trip dropped into an otherwise normal conversation. The instinct is to respond right away, in the heat of the moment, matching their energy. But smart people have trained themselves to insert a pause first, even 5 seconds of space. One breath, one beat of silence before responding, is often enough to shift from reacting out of the hook they just set to responding from a place of actual clarity. That pause isn't hesitation and it isn't weakness. It's where almost all of your power in the interaction actually lives. The person who reacts instantly is playing the game on their terms. The person who pauses is playing on their own. Way number 5, they stop trying to be understood. This one is uncomfortable to hear because we're wired to want people to finally get it. We want the toxic parent, the manipulative partner, the difficult coworker to eventually understand our side, admit their impact, see things clearly. But here's the hard truth. Some people were never going to get it. Not because you explained it poorly, not because you didn't find the right words, but because being understood was never actually their goal to begin with. For some people, misunderstanding you serves them. Clarity would take away their leverage. Smart people learn to redirect that deep need for validation elsewhere, toward people who are actually capable of listening, instead of endlessly trying to get through to someone who benefits from not hearing you. Letting go of that hope isn't giving up. It's often the exact moment real peace starts. Way number 6. They document instead of debate. In situations with a real history of manipulation, especially at work and co-parenting arrangements, or an ongoing family conflict, smart people stop relying on verbal conversations and start putting things in writing instead. A text instead of a phone call, an email summary sent right after a meeting, just to confirm what we agreed on. This isn't about being petty or building a case out of spite. It's about removing the ability for the story to get quietly rewritten later. Toxic dynamics often rely heavily on confusion, selective memory, and outright denial. That's not what I said. You're remembering it wrong. Documentation removes both the confusion and the room for denial. It gives you something solid to stand on when someone else is trying to make the ground shift under you. And way number 7, the hardest one of all. They accept they can't fix the person. This is usually the very last thing people let go of. The hope that if you're patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough for long enough, the person will eventually become who you need them to be. Smart people eventually learn that this hope is often the exact thing keeping them stuck in the cycle. Not the toxic person's behavior alone, the hope itself. Because as long as you're holding onto the version of them you believe is possible, you keep re-engaging with the version standing in front of you, the one actually causing harm. You can accept someone exactly as they are, fully and without illusion, and still choose not to keep engaging with the version of them that hurts you. That's not giving up on them. That's finally being honest about what you can and can't control. Now notice what all 7 of these actually have in common. None of them involve winning an argument. Not one. Every single strategy here is really about removing yourself from the game entirely. The explaining, the reacting, the documenting, the hoping to eventually be understood. Because toxic dynamics don't end when you out-argue them. They end when you stop supplying whatever it is they need to keep the pattern going. You were never supposed to out-debate a toxic person. You were supposed to stop needing their approval to feel at peace. If one of these 7 hit close to home, that's not a coincidence. It's usually the exact habit that's been keeping you stuck in a cycle that was never yours to fix in the first place. Subscribe for more psychology that actually protects you, not just entertains you.